I hope a lot of you saw the gigantic eruption in Russia. The ash cloud has now been confirmed at 67,000 feet. 57 degrees north latitude. It was actually like at 56, 50. We'll call it 57 degrees north latitude. Anywhere around that spot, and then going up to the North Pole is going to get a little bit cooler with all that ash and sulfur dioxide. In addition to the cavitating atmosphere from the Hungatonga eruption last year in January of 2022. There's a lot of things starting to manifest on the physical side from our planet's natural, and I say again, natural cycles that are affecting human civilization right here. But if you can see where that trend, where it's forecast to go on that side of things, and then you also can get a blueprint of where you can see it moving on the human side or the society or civilization side of things. There's really only two avenues to look at now, like how the trajectory of food economy is moving and how the earth changes are moving. It's all about the electromagnetic fields. And if you know the onset of the cycle and the intensity of the cycle, things that are happening right now make a lot more sense in the rapidity or how quickly they're moving. Ransom, thanks for joining me tonight. I guess that's the intro. I know we were talking a little bit earlier on air about quite a few different things and fires, and it just the world seems to get stranger by the minute.
Yeah, and most of it seems to be directed at food. I mean, I couldn't help think, I'm not saying anything is any kind of conspiracy, but, like within 3 days, and we've already been, noticing a lot of manufacturing centers and different things that seem to have industrial accidents recently. And so I'm looking at these 18,000 cows just getting fried in this thing, and I'm thinking, how? Why? And it just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy with it, but then at the same time, I'm seeing this recycling plant go up in flames, toxic fumes, forced evacuations, and then there's another fire. It's going on everywhere. So I don't know what's going on.
Ransom, may I interject? And remember, they had a controlled burn that smoked out the entire town here so much. You got to keep your windows closed this morning or else you really couldn't breathe. And my eyes are still not good, and I just feel really lethargic from breathing smoky air all day. And that was not warned either. It just popped up in the middle of the night. And can you imagine the smell of smoke suddenly in the middle of the night, and you don't know where it's coming from, and they didn't tell you controls burn's coming, and I live in a forest area, and we're smelling smoke suddenly? That too. Even though it wasn't industrial, it was purposefully lit by the forestry department.
Yeah, we had some of that in New Mexico too. And then ironically, like we were talking before, about a month after everybody saw the news about the forest fires and how they got started, they didn't really hide it. They said, the forest rangers were out there for the Forest Service. They were having a little controlled burn, burning some leaves. Next thing you know, biggest forest fire in New Mexico history. I think they were trying to push that title on it. And now you can go look it up, and there's article after article after article saying that the climate crisis was responsible for the fire. So whether it's lightning or somebody had a campfire or, the Forest Service decided that they needed a controlled burn that got out of control, later they'll just say, well, climate, it's a crisis. It's changing. If we just use these words, we don't have to explain anything. And you're seeing all this going down worldwide. It's not just us. You're looking over in Europe, you see the nuke plant get attacked and it's on fire. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about where's all the food coming from. Meanwhile, don't worry about it, because we're just going to go to World War III, it seems. If you haven't noticed, some guy got arrested for leaking information that confirmed what I said probably 6 months ago, that there were boots on the ground the whole time. And I read articles talking about, well, they have boots on the ground, but they're not doing anything. They're just trying to track where the weapons go. But it turns out what they're doing is delivering weapons and doing ops in the theater of war there. And that's expanding And we talked about the Taiwan-China situation that really will put the world at a standstill if that happens. Whether the U.S. gets involved, which it looks like they are, because guess what? We have boots on the ground in Taiwan too. But regardless of whether or not the United States gets involved in that, that is going to happen. They are excited about it. And not only that, they know the U.S. is busy with the Ukraine situation. They know that our munitions are out of stock because we've been giving it away, along with the majority of the other European nations, I might add. So there's been a massive move around of troops, ammunition, and machinery. And let's not forget the $81 billion that we left to the Taliban. So you can see, and then if you're paying attention in the Middle East, they're trying to do the self-fulfilling prophecy of Golgotha and Armageddon, whether or not the people that live in Jerusalem believe in Armageddon or that the self-fulfilling prophecy is about to happen there. We're seeing the Arab nations going together because they want a war, obviously. And let's not forget that Israel is a nuclear-powered nation. So no telling how that will turn out. But for those of you that are into scripture and things like that, Golgotha Hill is a literal physical place in Israel. It's not far from Jerusalem. And that's the prophesized, battle that'll happen there, Armageddon on Golgotha Hill, the same place people believe Jesus was crucified. They're really pulling on the heartstrings of certain demographics that believe in different religions, because the Abrahamic religions are waiting for certain signs and certain things to tell them at what time they live in. Even when you look through the book, I know a lot of people don't believe that there's astrological representation there, but there is. It's, a lot of people don't understand the, winter time, the death of the son of God, and I really want to get into this because this is a big deal. Like the year without a summer, 536 AD, different times you can point to where the sun, literally the son of the creator, God, whatever, it's up there in the sky, the light of the day, the bringer of the morning, the bringer of life in springtime and stuff. But we know that the sun literally stops on the 22nd from your point of view in the northern hemisphere, and it kind of doesn't come up anymore for 3 days, 22nd, 23rd, 24th. It's at the same apex in the sky, in the southern sky, for those of you that live in the northern latitudes. And that's the way we see it. And not only that, there's a constellation there that's called the Southern Crux, so literally the sun dies on the cross for 3 days, and then it's resurrected on the 25th, and then spring comes. So everybody's tied into the sun, whether they see it or not. And from references like Beware of the Water Bear, talking about Aquarius and the time we are now, to other religions and cultures that believe that at a certain time things will change, which is now. Most people agree that time is what we call Aquarius. So here we are. And now there's all kinds of stuff going on. And the idea that the sun may not be giving us the life-giving rays that it's always given us for a month, for 2 months. It depends on what we're talking about, because this solar maximum is really not so max right now. It's the sun's pretty quiet. So this is turning out to be a dud of a maximum. So what do you think that means going forward here when it goes back into the minimum, the smaller minimum during the grand solar minimum? I can see some interesting things happening, especially with volcanism and blotting out of the sun. And then when people are getting sun, because of things like you're talking about, hole in the ozone, they're not getting the right kind of sun. They're getting the crops are getting fried, the people are getting fried that are out in that. So when you add all that together with rumors of war and wars and all of this other stuff, it all comes together. And the elite know that, and they're playing on the heartstrings of people's beliefs. So they're setting up different scenarios and different places for different cultures and identities, so that they will be all involved with what's going on. So back to China. If they do, they don't even have to invade Taiwan. Say they just lock down the ocean around it And I don't think the United States will do anything about it. I just really don't. And if we do, then we'll know, admittedly, that we're in World War III, as you know, now we're openly talking about boots on the ground in Ukraine and in Taiwan, but there will be no more chip manufacturing. So this will be a reason for the entire world to have problems with their economies, their technologies, etc. And most of the world's technologies, let's face it, are involved in the distribution of goods worldwide. So once that shuts down and these lanes of traffic through the South China Sea stop and trade stops and people start hoarding their foods as nations and then as people, as families, and then, you know, as the individual, we can see that really tough times are very possible. And that's not even counting any kind of natural phenomenon that may or may not happen in the next few years, which I'm expecting several. So we're getting into a situation where the idea of mass starvation is a real possibility, at least mass malnutrition, if nothing else. And I wanted to get into that because you sent me this article talking about the Biden regime's set to starve conservation of the Western states for water under a new drought rules, 40 million Americans to be impacted. And
yeah, which publication was that?
This is in Natural News right here.
Natural News. Okay.
Yeah,
Mike
Natural
Adams'
News.
That's his website, Natural News.
You can't say that guy's name on the YouTube. He's one of those.
I said Michael Adelia. Michael Adelia.
Oh yeah, that dude. But anyway,
Mike Adams.
It's talking about that. And you can see that that's another aspect of war on growing food, because, you know, obviously that water leads to farms and ranches that grow beef and grow vegetables. But you know what? Here's a big stick in their eye. There's record amounts of rain and snowpack in the Rocky Mountains. So guess what? No matter what they do, there's going to be water available. Now, it might not be available. I'm really curious to see how this, interaction works out, where I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be an El Nino year, which means lots and lots of monsoon for these same areas that they're trying to say that there's too much drought and that they're, you can't use it and we're going to have to hoard the water. And then you think about these municipalities and states and what they do with it, like, California dumping all the fresh water into the bay and different things like that. You could see the sabotage with your own eyes. It's hard for me to believe that it's total incompetence, what's going on. It seems more like a well-regulated plan that's unfolding in front of us. And that plan means that you are going to be stuck where you're at by yourself with only yourself to depend on. And I think that this entire thing that's going on from coast to coast, and we'll get into it, I'll let you respond to some of the stuff. But I think it's systematically, they're about to start shutting down the major retail stores in the majority of low-income America, which will make people move where they're at to have to go to this centralized location to get their food. And when that happens, I think all hell is going to break loose as far as civilization, because people are going to start to be desperate. And I don't want to find myself in that situation. So I'm trying to plan my way out of that, if it's possible. And the only way to do that is to start making backup plans right now and grow. Whatever you can grow inside your house, whatever you can grow in your yard. If you have a little more land, you should start growing. But beware, we may have natural phenomenon that will prevent you from growing food depending on where you live. And if that is the case, you need to start thinking about some backup plans to get you to 2 or 3 or 4 years. No telling how it lasts. And I've been talking a decade, and that seems to be the plan. And when you come back, well, I'm going to show everybody that article I was talking about, but also this idea that technology is at an apex, that if you're the right kind of person and you make it through this reset, they're going to offer you long-lasting life. And they say it's possible, and they're even talking seriously about the ability to transfer what we call a soul, or what you call your mind, or whatever it is, your consciousness, and transfer it over into a machine, which I don't think is going to work, but I'm sure they will try to convince the world that it does work. And maybe that'll help with the loneliness the world's going to feel when the reduction of population starts staring everyone in the face.
Yeah, getting stuck in the machine. Imagine if that was a soul harvesting machine, and You thought you were going to connect and have your mind there, but your soul was stolen and put it into a hell realm like that in a digital form. Nasty vibration on the planet. That has got to go. Can't even accept that. This thing's got to go. And, you know, time in history tells people know the vibration, and they even have names for this vibration that's an interference pattern right now in our existence here. The jinn is one word that those in the Middle East might use to describe it. David Icke talks a huge amount about all the different religions that have very specific names of genres of, like I say, times that return in cycles that disrupt, and this energy frequency comes back, but it's only able to hold state because the planet's going into a different star sign. It's going into Aquarius. It's going to vibrate faster. So certain things can only hold in certain states. Because you have to think about it. Like, you talked about the beliefs that seem to be a lot of news pushing toward. Okay, so there's a huge amount for the Christian revelation coming at the moment. There'll be rumors of war. You know, a third of the planet's oceans die. There's the horsemen of the apocalypse. This sort of thing is truly what you're seeing at the moment play out. And when this Hunga Tonga ozone depletion event hits in middle of July, or let's say first weeks of August, there's going to be a huge amount of UVB radiation striking the bottom of the planet in the southern hemisphere, which will reduce crops further. And then, you know, there's massive droughts going on in the grow belt of the Midwest. You know, I've been watching the U.S. Drought Monitor. I'm going to actually be doing that in a video tonight later. But the crops are under duress. Like if you think about good to very good quality in an entire wheat harvest in America, they're only down around 29% of the entire harvest of the whole last year in wheat is good to very good. The rest of it is junk or animal food, or lying along the banks of the Mississippi River that never got exported. Low water. Remember, it was a drought because of climate change. Now, as Ransom referenced, probably going to get a lot of super big mega floods coming down the Mississippi this spring. You know why? Because all that grain harvest from last year is lining up and down the Mississippi River 200 miles in both directions, just 100 million tons of grain sitting on the banks under tarps, no less. There's a code for it, so don't worry. But they couldn't get it exported because of the low water. Mississippi, lowest ever. And they tried to dredge, and it really didn't work, and the grain shuttles were stuck everywhere. Or grain barges, however you like to term that. Imagine the washout of the Mississippi. That food goes down. You know, you're closing stores all over the place. But for me, it's about the cycle. Okay, those are the repercussions. Those are the things that the elite are riding on top of the natural cycle to get a larger outcome from. So think about this. Pluto for a second. Everything's changing. Pluto's entering Aquarius right now, but the thing is, it entered on March 23rd. You have to realize it's a generational shift, because that planet's 248 years to orbit the sun one time around, and it can stay in the zodiac, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 years. It's in its sign, and it's been in Capricorn since 2008. But again, Pluto's death and rebirth and transformation, is it not? But as coming into Aquarius, whatever it touches, the shadows, reveal something, revealing of systems, revealing of financial, revealing of what you consider ingrained institutions. Like you're able to see through that veil. And what is this water sign that we're coming into? You know, we had the Hunga Tonga eruption, which added 10% more moisture in the Earth's atmosphere. In a single one day, we added 10% more moisture to the atmosphere after that eruption. Well, down in Fort Lauderdale, they broke the old rain record by 10 times in Florida. 10 times the old record was broken. And then you're seeing the massive snow dumps. the water is in the atmosphere now. So this is interesting because you're talking about the water pouring out of Aquarius. It's a faster vibratory energy. But think about, you were talking to China for a second. They have something called the Feng Long and the Shui Long, which are the dragons, like the wind dragon, means a super high, powerful, very strong solar wind. I lived in China for a while. I was super into the history and trying to equate the electric geology and the flow of the Berkey currents and how this system of electrification on plasma ropes rolling through our universe and connecting galaxies and then that down to our spiral arm. And then where does it go from there? So there's something way big of a power source that finally loops out into our regional star system and then comes to the next star closest to us 4 light years away, and then it comes to our star. And when that current goes down or up, the Earth's affected. And the Chinese had mapped it all out. See, that's the whole thing. The cycles are known already. The Mayans sure did. What other cultures across the planet do you think had mapped that out? The Sumerians? I'm sure they did too. Aboriginals? Obviously. It's the longest of the peoples, right? They for sure knew these cycles. So you have to think about the sun as being fire. Because it is. Okay, it's plasma sheath on the outside. Okay, but it's fire in the classical representation, fire. So what's water do to fire? And that's the age we have entered. And, coming into Aquarius, what was that, 2021? We actually officially entered into Aquarius. And now this Pluto is swinging into Aquarius also. And all these massive changes are happening on cycles that affect our planet greatly because the magnetic field of the sun is affected greatly, and we're so intertwined with that. We're so affected by the sun's magnetic field. Oh, that thing's like 1.2 million times bigger than the Earth. And, it's just, there's a lot of what as above, so below. But then what's out past Arcturus, go further back. Okay, what happens in the Hunab Ku, which the Mayans defined as the black hole of our galaxy? Okay, what happens with the current flow of that, and where's its power source coming from? And can that be mapped out over 220 million years on whether there might be high periods or low periods in terms of stars and the way their plasma is glowing and creating heat by the electrical current going into it? Not fusion, not fission, electrical current riding on Berkey currents through the entire galaxy. Map it out and you'll know water and wind do 2 different things, don't they? What about, I agree it could be 10 years or more, actually. 2035, we should stabilize again with food production, maybe even a little 30 or 2032. But you are going to have to carry yourself through this time. It's not like you're going to eat up a bunch of storable food and then be done. All right, that's a great start in the beginning. You need that kind of extra food in case you can't get to the stores and in case things are broken down for a minute. But you're going to have to replenish those stocks. You're going to have to replenish it. And hunting won't be an option because everybody's going to be hunting. So then you're brought down, you're going to raise your own animals again, whether it be rabbits or quail or chicken or sheep or whatever. Because there's an economy of a scale of having a cow out there. It's going to weigh way more feed and way more waste to dispose of and way more people know when it's there than a flock of quail or 10 rabbits in cages or 20 rabbits. We're going to have to replenish. Now, what happens when your machinery breaks? And that's where you come into the chip shortage. Like, how do you repair everything again? Well, you need blacksmiths. Personally, Ransom, I think we're stepping back into the, say, mid to late 1800s in terms of the tech that we'd have, the skills and abilities, because the forge is a forge, but we know what you can improve on it a little bit now. You don't have to step on the bellows. You can actually press a button and make a motor spin and push air in there to do the same thing. But think about how many people need to blacksmith or fix parts or how many. Okay, if you're going to weld, you're going to run out of rods eventually. So what does that leave you in terms of being able to maybe scrape something off another vehicle to use again? Is it going to be recycling of welds actually in the metal itself to recycle that? Or are you just going to be just straight blowtorch welding and only hot metals can come together? That brings us back to the 1800s again. The very simplest of the things will still be here. It's just more high-techy stuff is going to disappear for a minute. You're going to have to grow your own food, that's for sure, and purify your own water. People talk about growing food. Great. Purifying water, though, too, that's another one. Like, where's your closest water source? And can you get there and walk back with how many gallons one time? But see, having storable water, let's say you have to go a mile or even half a mile on a bicycle to go with water bottles to go get. You're coming back. I don't think you're coming back with, 4 or 5 gallon bottles full of water. Your tires would be flat. And you got to start thinking about super beefed up tires and how to transport things. But think about your water. Can you carry it back? No, that's going to be heavy. And usually they're round. You need to get the ones with handles on them. And how much can you carry in each arm? Oh, gee, and I can only bring 6 gallons back because each 3-gallon thing weighed like 28 pounds each, and you're walking down. Like, you think you're going to be limited to economies of scale too. You can comfortably walk back with 6 gallons of water, a guy. We're going to have to replenish some of our own stuff. And then how many times do you do that? 6 gallons up and down the hill, a mile away, half a mile away, up and down the hill in inclement weather, rain, cold, sleet. You're like the mailman, but going to get water. I don't know. You're going to have to think of a different way and something better than that. I mean, you could, in a pinch, run that circuit, but that's going to take a lot of calories to run over there and grab that water and bring it back. So then you got to think about efficiencies too. Like, water is going to be a big one, especially with waste. We got sheep now, and they are waste machines. That's all they do is eat and poo, eat and poo, eat and poo. Well, we started to use it for compost. We started a couple compost piles and filling in some holes out where we dug some tree roots out off some pine trees that had fallen over. But we can get rid of it. We got a farm. So then what people if they're in an enclosed space, Too many things to think about. I just got sidetracked. Ransom, please join again. I was just thinking about where I should grow marshmallows. That was the thing that distracted me. I have this seed pack of marshmallows in front of me. Where's that? It's from Mountain Valley Seeds. And Althea officinalia marshmallow seeds. So I got distracted because we tore the holes out of the stumps, and there's some water. So maybe we'll plant them in there. It catches water every time. I wouldn't say swampy, but it's always wet. So excuse me for a rant, man. Go. Give me help.
Yeah, where are you going to get your water from? And I think the scenario that's going to happen, what I was talking about before, is I've been watching this pattern unfold for the last 3 years, where stores, first of all, we had the epidemic. Okay. So that cut the hours of everything. Most places that were 24 hours now are, only half the day. They close about 11 o'clock if you're lucky. Some of the smaller chains close even, earlier, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So you already got your opportunity to get food cut by half if you live in a city. And now what's happening is all the locations crime is going up, and no one wants to admit that. So people are getting robbed. They have people going in flash mobs. All of these things are happening on top of the prices just skyrocketing for other reasons as far as food goes. Now, where we live in Albuquerque, they've started closing down stores. In other places, there are other stores. So we know like Target and Whole Foods, Walmart. There's a bunch more I can't name off the top of my head, but they're closing their locations in, quote, low-income areas or high crime areas. Now, for people in California, that's just about everywhere. Well, let me tell you what happens when they close those stores. Some of the stores stay open, but they're in, how should we say it, upper middle class or better neighborhoods with higher prices. So what's going to happen is those people that were shopping at the places where they could get cheaper food affordable food, excuse me, not cheaper food, but affordable food, is going to be closed because they had to close for whatever reason that they came up with, crime or location, etc. And then those people that live in those neighborhoods are going to go to the stores that are still open. And what's going to happen there necessarily is the crime will go up, and then they will start using guards at the stores. And not only guards, they'll start going with this idea that you need to be identified when you go and you're in a single file line. And they have already trained you to stand 6 feet apart in a single file line to do your shopping. They've already been doing that. The program is going. So what's going to happen is there's going to be centralized locations to get food. And those places are going to be out of stock. They're going to be guarded, and they're going to be full of people. So they're going to be crowded. And what happens every time when you see crowds develop, especially when there's anxiety about not getting your whatever it is you're getting, you can just look back at the years of Black Friday to see the psychology behind what's going to happen with the food. Now, keep in mind, Black Fridays were always about, savings or sales on things that you probably don't even need. TVs, this, that, the other thing, trinkets. Now, imagine that same scenario, but people are trying to feed their children. It's going to get violent, and they already know that. And that's why DuByne is sharpening his big knife in the background right there. So we all know what's going to happen if you come out there and trying to get his corn in his place. So you can see how things are going to get out of control. But think about how they've trained us over the years. Over the last several years to be single file, to only go between certain hours. Then you add this idea of the ID check of social credit scoring, which definitely will be in there. And then I want to move to part of the distraction and hear what you think about this. So this is an article that I was talking about earlier, where they're trying to convince people, you know what, it's almost like when you go to church and they're pretty much telling you, don't worry about it. It's all in God's hands. He'll take care of you. Don't even think about it, and it makes people stop trying to do things for themselves because they got this idea that everything's going to be all right. Well, they're trying to do the same thing as far as government. They'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. And then they're putting out these ideas for people, like in the dates. We always see the same dates. So here's this article that's talking about by 2030, you can become immortal. You can visit your own funeral. And they list all these different ways that these technocrats have in store that they could possibly, do this idea. And it's fairy tales. Even if the technology was real, you, the peasant, are not going to be, part of that situation. So, however, when the reset happens and, we got baby factories and only certain kinds of food, and think about this idea, think about the bottleneck of the seeds and foods that you'll only be able to get through certain distributors. And most likely those seeds are not going to be heirloom. They're not going to be non-GMO. So you're going to have little success trying to grow from the food that you're buying or the seeds that you're getting that aren't heirloom. And then the idea of being altered, this is what they're doing to us. They're altering our minds. They're altering our bodies. And as you allude to all the time with the vibration of what's going on around the world, they are attempting to alter our very soul and the way that we vibrate on the planet. And this is kind of evident, and I think it has a lot to do with this idea about the 6-foot radius around a human being. Some people think about it as, personal space. But why is it that you think about that? The reason is because when someone comes into your field, and this is scientifically proven, your energy fields interact and observe each other. So you feel the vibe that's coming off of them in one way or another. And now think about these crowded areas with no food and the Black Friday scenario. And in the backdrop, they're trying to tell you, don't worry about it. We got it. If you just keep doing what we want, you'll be able to live forever. And it's all fairy tales, because the truth is if people don't start preparing now, depending on where you live, there is going to be a scenario in which you will need to take care of yourself. Nobody's going to come rescue you. Nobody's going to come feed you. Nobody's going to bring you bottled water like they do after the hurricanes. And we're lucky that we have a civilization right now that tries to do that. But you can see every time it becomes in the government's control or the government's hands, they fail the public every single time. The only time that these events are ever taken care of is when civilization comes together and helps each other. Harvey was a great example. Katrina's another example of, what would happen when you leave it up to the government to take care of the populace. Katrina's that example. Now, Harvey was an example of what happens when people don't wait for the government. And you remember, you saw what were they? I forget. I don't want to name them bad and sound racist. The redneck rescuers, or I forgot what they were called. But basically, it was a bunch of bass fishers and people that have boats. They were hauling their boat down there, whatever they had. Yeah.
Ransom. That's the Cajun Navy, boy.
There you go. I'm sorry, I messed it up, but it's still, the same idea. That was the public coming to the aid of the public, and you see how much better it worked out with people rescuing each other and helping each other versus when the government just sits there and looks at it and lets everything fall apart as if it was planned. And then I'll get to this article while you kind of talk about that here.
No, that's a perfect assessment. Like, think about how it all went down. Okay, the grand solar minimum starting somewhere around 2015. It was starting. That's when I picked it up. I was starting to see it. 2016, 17, there were a lot more signs. Okay, things seemed to be, but it wasn't really like a super gigantic jump until like 2018. And then it was significantly larger, and in terms of everything from freezes to snowstorms to wind speeds and, wave heights and everything that you can think of was just incredibly amplified. So for me, if I knew I was looking for those kind of signs on the cycles, I would look for an uptick in bolides and debris coming through the atmosphere. I would look at the number of earthquakes and volcanoes and eruptions in terms of whatever the seismicity. But then also the number of cold events, because you already know that the cycle's coming inbound, and these are going to be the things that will be like disrupted atmospheric flows from the jet streams and the cloud cells not going in the right places and colliding in on each other and like raining out, like rivers from the sky, literally, is what we just saw over Fort Lauderdale. That was the best example of a river from the sky dumping 25 inches in 7 hours. I don't even know if you could breathe in that. I'll say that again. They got 25 inches, which is more than 2 feet of solid rain in 7 hours. Like, think about that for a second. That is the heaviest rainstorm you have probably ever been in your life, and triple or quadruple it for 7 straight hours. That's insane. So you're going to look for these. Okay, well, that's another anecdotal piece of, okay, well, I know the cycle is inbound. This sort of thing was happening, extremes 2018 and 19. If I was an elitist, I'm just saying if I were, I was, all right, well, it's definitely go time, because 2015, they were looking for markers moving forward in time that would vindicate that or show that, verify it. And then the uptick hit in 2018, and then suddenly the repo crisis in 2019, the second repo crisis. So that's where a bank doesn't trust another bank. And what usually happens is that, let's say Ransom has a bank and I have a bank. And then there's the Federal Reserve over on the side over there. Well, if Ransom trusts me and I can borrow his money for 5% overnight, and he believes that I'll pay him back in the morning, he'll let me use the money for 5 or 5.25 or 5.5% overnight. But then maybe one day something happens in the economy, just like now, and Ransom says, David, I'm sorry, I can't lend you the money because I'm just not sure if I'll get it all back. And then the Federal Reserve, then I go over there and say, okay, thanks, Ransom, thanks for the business. Hey, Federal Reserve, I can't give him any loans overnight from Ransom. I need your help. Can I get? And they go, oh yeah, what do you need? We're backed by the government. What do you need? Well, I need 100 million, 100 billion. And in 2019, it got up to about 800 billion a night was being used by the Fed, because the banks weren't lending. So that entire market dried up. So no banks trusted any banks, and they were on the catastrophic collapse and unless something would allow them to print more money than had ever been printed in human history. That was the only thing that saved that collapse. And you knew it was the ace card. You knew it was. Suddenly the vid came out, but I'm just talking about an event as an ace card to allow you to print money to infinitum at the very last moment to still string the system along just long enough for those last 2 to 3 years to use the supply chains to get what they need for continuity government ready for lasting 20 years into the future. Like what you think are shortages on the surface were redirections of those supply chains underground or whatever storage facilities in mountain, whatever. So they knew it. I knew it. That's what the whole DAP 2030 channel is about, is understanding these cycles. But now all the banks are collapsing in unison, and that trump card that was played at the end of 2019 into 2020 when the world changed forever, that was the event that allowed never-ending money printing to occur up until this point. Well, now the never-ending money printed has ceased. You know, when there were no longer mandates and you saw the U.S. remove their mandate today for any kind of COVID emergency, when that emergency ended predominantly around the world, the U.S. is probably the last country to, rescind that. I don't know why so long, like really 6 months after other countries had already said enough. Okay. That was the dry up of the faucet turned off on money. So for me, that was the locking up of the cave door, or like starting to bring up the drawbridge. Because now needs to come the chaos phase to keep you disorganized enough that you don't realize they all left and went underground with all the stuff that they just, had redirected the last 2 to 3 years. Hey, you didn't tell my family? What? That's going to be way angrier than, hangry people plus that, you're going to see something that is going to rip your psyche to shreds. Kind of go in that direction, I think. People are going to be a little bit perturbed when they realize that the cycle was known really 7-8 years ago, even more. But now the collapse comes. And it's not going to be a collapse as such. It's a swing of wealth from one part of the world to the next. But for us in the West here, it is going to be a collapse. So watch these gold and silver prices running up. And, Ransom, let me ramble on here. Because if you're going to go to the central bank digital currencies, that will be kind of at the end of our generation that people will be fully into it. There's going to be this transition period, probably 20 years, 15 years where, I'm going to say no, you'll say no. A lot of people will say no, but a lot of people will say yes. And there's going to have to be a medium of barter or exchange in the middle there, which will exist for some time. So I'm looking at gold and silver would be one of those options. Because, you can always say real estate and tools and all this stuff. Oh, seed's another one. But in terms of really going into another city or a market and having something that'll buy you, could you really trade the tools? Maybe. But for sure, you slap an ounce on the glass and somebody's going to say, I'll take that. So I'm looking at silver today, and I can't believe the prices have really risen up. Even it's up 23 more cents today. It's at 26.30. It was only 25 just last week. That's a lot for silver to run. Gold's at almost all-time highs. It's at 20.59, but I think the all-time high before was 20.80. So it's only $20 from the all-time highest to the high. And as soon as this hits the news and everybody understands that the financial system ain't coming back, for my best pronunciation, it ain't coming back. It really isn't. It's meant to cause so much chaos for the escape of those who took the supply chains over. You're not in their club, sorry. So you need a diversion while they're escaping. And then, they'll have to cancel meetings and you can't have this offices open anymore. So everybody just disappear like they did online before. Now with AI, do you know if they're real or not real? But a lot of stores are going to close too. And that would be a soft way to get for, how do you think, a curfew. Think about a curfew without being called a curfew. Well, if all the food stores are closed at like 6, 7 o'clock and there's really no businesses and everything's closed in terms of business, that's going to shrink down to huge amount of traffic. And there's only going to be just a few people on the road versus what there would now. And don't give people a reason to go out and they won't go out. the gold and silver. Once people realize where this is headed, there definitely won't be enough of it. I could say that. Nor tools either. But me looking at this, I always knew gold and silver would be a storeway where the money's going to run to. A lot of money ran from the mid-sized banks out to bigger banks like JP Morgan, Bank of America, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of that money they got pulled out. Yeah, some of that went up to Bank of America, JP Morgan, but 50% of it stayed and went to the coin or the bullion dealer. People they understand it now, really. It's starting to make even the most basic of news that this metals price is going up and the dollar is not going to be used around the planet anymore. So I don't know. Business will change. Maybe you have to prove your funds and show your gold and silver before you go into the supermarket. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, I would like to ask the audience a question, because here we'll get into this article about, we have this date 2030 that you've been using, for your whole channel, the whole idea. And then here we go. If I can find it here. Yeah. So this is the same date that they're giving, how the transhuman movement or the future of gene editing and all of this stuff come together. So here's part of what they're trying to tell you, that, don't worry about it. You could listen to that crazy conspiracy theorist guy, David DuByne, about what it's going to be like by 2030. Or you could listen to us, and you could live forever, immortality by 2030. You can electrically, become immortality. They're going to load you in a machine, if you can believe that. They want to freeze your brain. I don't know how that's going to work out without a body. I mean, why would you want to be living as just a brain? And then they have cell rejuvenation, because if you've looked into the technology of that, it's really close to the legends of the vampiric stuff and, ambrosia, things like that, and then reanimating the brain by giving it a cocktail of different chemicals. So, if you've looked back, if you're a fan of David DuByne and Adapt 2030 and the message that he's been giving out, do you believe that message of growing food, preparing, figuring out your environment, or do you trust them that don't worry about it? We'll just put your brain on ice. We'll load it in a computer. And you know what? That'll save space too. And then you wonder why we live in such a civilization that's starting to show signs of empire collapse. You can compare it to any of these ancient civilizations that fell, including human sacrifice, etc. You can name the things that's going on. But how did they get us to a point where the fads or the ideas are all about death and destruction and, pride and vanity and et cetera, while you're busy with all of that, they are plotting and planning to take control of every aspect of human life. And what that means literally is all they have to do is get complete control of the food and the interconnected trade that's involved with that food. And if you want to survive in their world with their kind of bottleneck genetics they created in a lab and produced food for whatever purpose or randomly they decided to do it, whatever you want to believe. Or you could try heirloom seeds, the same thing that's been feeding everybody this entire time of human civilization since domestication and farming started. And realize that each individual has the power to create, grow, and thrive. And not only just you, but your family, your neighbors, everyone around you. And all of that potential comes out of little, lifeless, inanimate objects called seeds. And if you don't think you can do that, maybe make a friend that does that and find some kind of trade. And you were talking about silver and gold. You imagine how much of that people have hoarded over time for different occasions and always turned out to be right, except for, God forbid, you get intercepted wearing all your precious metals because you waited too long. You waited after they took the guns. You waited till they told you to live in little 15-minute cities, otherwise known in World War II as ghettos. And I can go on and on at the similarities of that. So, anywhere else where that didn't happen, where it didn't get to that point, people were right about holding on to their precious metals, about holding on to their seeds, about holding on to their land, because those are the only things that are important. None of this stuff that's going on television, from politics to entertainment, has anything to do with you surviving, thriving, and making it past the reset. And God forbid that, a natural reset is going to happen regardless of any plans of the elite. And that's what people just don't understand. And, you think back to I keep bringing it up, 536 AD. They were just living, and then about 526 or something like that, they had a big earthquake in the Byzantine Empire that was kind of like the indication of things to come. And then, everything got dark, everything got dusty, everything got cold, nothing was growing, nothing. And this event just happened in a few years. So if you think that it can't happen to us, you are delusional and naive, because it can. And it can be anything from World War III to a natural phenomenon. And what are you going to do with nothing when the power's turned off? Your refrigerator food is rotten. You don't have nothing in the cupboards, because let me tell you, that's like 80-90% of the population are living not only from paycheck to paycheck, but from meal to meal, meaning they don't have any food. Most of the people, if you ever visit in the city, you go to their house, there's nothing in their house, because they're so used to the instant gratification life that they think they can just go down to the deli or the store or whatever and just get their meal for today and for tomorrow. But once they close, you can't do that. So what are all those millions of people going to do? Well, they're going to come for the people that prepared, or they're just not going to make it. And that's a sad reality. I don't want to, be Debbie Downer, but the positive part of this is you don't have to be one of those people. You can start planning. And even if you haven't started growing or stocking, you can do that now. It takes a little bit of time, but once you start going, you get more and more and more safety and insurance and peace of mind that you're going to be able to handle whatever comes, whether it's flood, hurricane, all of it. I mean, why not be prepared instead of just waiting like deer in the headlights for something to happen and then wondering what you're going to do about it then?
You Debbie Downer. I can't even believe that statement. If the power goes down, and I know it's going to be down for a long period of time, like just say you knew it was going out for weeks, plural, or a month or something, I would use my generator to keep my freezers going, but at the same time, I would instantly be pulling out the canning jars and canning that as I go, and use the generators to keep your refrigerators cool while you start to can. That would be a wise thing to do, because you're going to have to immediately do something with that meat. If it goes out for that period of time, meat, you can still preserve it. Just can it. That's, again, you're going to want to save some of your veggies and things too. You're going to need to can some of that stuff. You could dry some, but canning. Some of those are old skills. Again, that's like an 1870s, 1860s thing, even further back. We're going back to that, think about your grandmother, grandfather, way back. Everybody canned. It's just going to revert into the past a little bit. It was kind of a cool communal thing too. People, neighbors would combine. Maybe you have like 100 pounds of apples or 200 pounds, and everybody, skins them, cores them, and makes applesauce at the same time. And then you can that, for example. Whatever, it's families, and it's kind of a fun thing. We've lost that. We really have. And like you're saying, a lot of periods in history match up. But it's interesting, speaking of cycles, at the Bible time, let's say 2,000 years prior, the Bible, reading it sounds exactly like today, with immorality and the changes of this and the exact same. If you were reading about, it's almost like you're reading our news headlines from today. So if you know that that's going to return that type of behavior after it's washed away for 1,000 years, you would write about it in a book. In 2,000 years, this is coming again. It's the vibrational frequency, not a person.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack. because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down, and things that you think about it right this second. Everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps. The 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. Political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think, everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
When we're talking about these seeds and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way, weather, war, whatever it is, you're prepared, you have security. At least you know that your belly's going to be full so that you can continue on the work that needs to be done to stabilize everyone's life around you.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. My apologies, arriving late. I thought I heard the music stop just in time. David DuByne, Ransom, Godwin here tonight, taking you through the second hour Mini Ice Age Conversations. As always, really thank you for being here to partake in the conversation or listen to. And remember, we are streaming live, so the comment and chat boards within Rumble and the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast channel, Mountain High Time. There's people talking in there. So if you want to talk with people of like minds, please do. It's all about finding solutions and answers because the world we see, it's changing. It's absolutely changing. So, that's great. We see it. Yeah, huge signpost in the middle there. Okay, now what do you do? That's the whole thing. What do you do next? So thank you, Revolution Radio, for letting us have a venue for free speech here. A lot of platforms are closing, but then others are expanding as well. So somewhere in the middle, it stays. If you appreciate free speech, consider Revolution Radio. Donate tabs right at the top. And Ransom, as I was thinking about that and looking at a screen before we went on break, I had 1 gram gold bars up here, $108 for a 1 gram. Now remember, there's 32 ounces 31.8 in grams per 1 ounce, a troy ounce. $108. So even if you multiply by 32, that's $3,200. Now you get asked the question, like, what would you really buy? Small little bits of gold, like a 1 gram bar, which that's 1 whole ounce broken down into 1/32 of itself. So you get 33 of these little packets to equal 1 ounce, like a 1 ounce round one. I don't know. And those 1/4 ounce here are a little expensive too because see, that's what you're going to need is you're going to need these 1/4 ounce ones, right? You're going to need 1/4 ounce. You're going to need 1/2 ounce, 1 ounce. That's what houses would be bought with. But now there's this huge, gigantic premium on everything where if you want to get a 1/4 ounce gold from like the U.S. Mint or something, $694. But you can get 1 whole ounce for $2,200. That's $600 more for the same exact weight of metal, just broken into 4 pieces for you versus 1 big piece. So where are we going to go with this? You can definitely see the economy shifting. And before we went on the break, I kind of got lost in my thought. So what will all this extra water do on all of what was the previous era of fire? It's more like we're, moving through the galactic cross or something where all this energetic change happening, societal change happening, and all the earth change happening at the same time can only be described as literally a change of an age. And I think that's where I left it last time before we dropped off. Everybody, welcome back. Ransom, Godwin.
I was showing everybody some of these silver coins that I've been saving up when you were talking about that gold. You should be trying to get your hands on every bit of those, like the Mercury dimes, the old JFK quarters, and what's that Eisenhower on the $50? I forget. No, he's on
those
the
are the
$1.
90%, right?
Yeah, the old school ones. But even if you come across all that, you should just start stacking that all together, because silver's just going to continue to go up. And I brought this up before. If you happen to own gold, it hasn't changed in value, and I don't know how long, at least since the 20s, as I brought up the whole little parable about the suit, costing about $200. A really, really nice suit in the 20s was about $200. Ironically, it was $200 for, what was it? Was it a pound? I think it's a pound, and now it's about 2,000, right? Or ounce, excuse me, not pound.
I'll take your pound for 2,000. No problem. I'll take it. I'll take it off your hands.
I misspoke, but yeah, you know what I mean. Now the ounce is 2,000 plus, and that's about, if you were going to go get a nice suit, a really nice suit, that's about how much you're going to pay. So the gold has stayed the same value over this whole time, while 95% of the value of our currency has disappeared since then. So yeah, even stockpiling, even if you come across jewelry, whatever it is, silver and gold, you should stockpile that, because I'm thinking, the U.S. dollar, because I've been really diving into this Brinks thing to see if it really is going to overtake the dollar. And from all, scales, it looks like it's about doing equivalent right now, and more. Like I just saw Lula, from Brazil going over there right after. And what's really scary about Lula is that he's really friends with all the lefties in the U.S. Like, they're buddies. They go take pictures together. And they're happy to push this idea of socialism, communism light, whatever you want to call it. And all of these guys are going with China and Russia and the Brinks. And it's in their interest, because obviously the other side of the ideas is all situated in the U.S. dollar, because we've let them decide, how that's going to be, what worth. We've given the power over to the central banks. We've allowed oil-rich countries to continue to sell us stuff instead of us, using our own wealth here. And we're getting to that time where, don't worry about all the oil and the dollars and stuff. What you're worried about is a plate of food. And I hate to say that, because, I've been relatively poor all my life, and I've never really worried so much about money. But you know what? Being poor, one thing that you do have to deal with every once in a while is an empty belly. And everybody knows, if you have children, you're willing to do just about anything to spare your child from feeling that feeling of starvation. And I don't care where you live. If you live in Africa, if you live in South America, North America, it does not matter. It doesn't matter your religion. It doesn't matter none of that stuff. When it comes down to your children not being able to eat, people are willing to do some really extraordinary things. And I don't mean in a positive way. So we need to, take a hold of that vibration and send it into a different direction, at least for us, or the people or the people you can reach, or the people you can talk to that will actually listen and agree with you that things are going in a bad direction. And that way you'll have a little network set up, so that at least you, your friends, your community can pull resources together. If you want to do it that way, you can go it on your own, but I wouldn't suggest it, because work is really hard to do by yourself. I mean, I know that for a fact. I've done lots of work. It's easier to do it with a couple of people. Things can get done faster. You can ask the Amish, when they put up a barn or they do whatever they do, they just slap it up, because everybody comes together. They're not getting paid for that. They're actually putting into the community. And that's an idea that we're going to have to start dealing with. And I realize we're a capitalist country, but capitalism is built on the idea of a free market. And there's no more free of a market than only dealing with people that, have the same mindset as you, as far as growing food, producing things, and, trading and information that is actually worth trading. Different farm techniques. There's all kinds of people out there that have little pieces to the puzzle on how each of us can do our part and produce enough. And whenever you intertwine that with other people, it becomes so much more production happening. So like, even if you're out there gardening, it's hard to do everything by yourself. However, a single person can grow enough food for probably 5 people if they have enough time to do it. Now, a lot of people are stuck in jobs and revolve around that. So somebody in your family, or everybody a little bit, should pitch in to make sure that you have a backup plan of growing stuff and storing stuff. And we need to get out of this whole idea. And if you haven't noticed, everything from food to entertainment to news, you name it, has been it's kind of like the TikTok effect, but it's deeper than that. It's basically, they have figured out that human beings are like goldfish. And as long as you can keep them with a constant, instant gratification of whatever it is, whether it's media, whether it's news or food, instant gratification, so you don't think about nothing in the future. That's how the entire system is now set up, because they realize that for the most part, humans are like goldfish. They only can concentrate on things for 7 to 9 seconds. And, it's hard to keep a cohesion, especially if you have all of these other factors distracting you in life that you think are important, but they're not really important. And I've realized that long ago. The only thing that's really important is health and, the health of the people around you. And that's mental health and physical health. And you're not going to do anything if people are malnourished or they're mentally upset, which goes along with being malnourished. And that brings you back to what we're talking about. Whenever only the elite or only the corporations or only the government have control over the food, they have control over your body. They have control over your mind. And when you're eating their foods and you're playing the whole game and you're doing what's, because let's face it, when you go to the grocery store, you're not looking at food. You're looking at food-like stuffs with advertising that's targeted to you with fads of the current culture. And that's all it is. It's one big, I don't know. It's like a psyop. I'll go ahead and say it's like a psyop, from everything to like when you go down the grocery store and your kids are looking eye level with these cartoon characters that are, telling them, buy my food, buy my food. And then when you think about what is all that food, that's the stuff that they're pushing that you just don't want to eat. It's not actually food. It's food-like stuffs. It's GMO. It's chemicals. It's packaging, and that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the fad. You're paying for the message, and you're paying for the packaging. And what you get really when you realize, and you come home from the store and you paid $300 and you got like 6 boxes, a couple bottles, and what is this? This is 2 or 3 days worth of supplies. That is that's not going to work unless you're really, really rich, and then you can do that. But if you're poor, the packaging, all of that's waste. So if you're growing your own food and you're getting it right out of your yard, you're literally bringing it from your yard to your plate. You're cutting out all of them other things that could possibly happen to your food, including contamination from various ways, whether it's a bacterial, viral, man-made, whatever it is. And I know we can't talk about it, but I would really suggest that everybody look into the new additive that's going to be, it's already in Japan. It's happening with the milk. The pork industry, I've researched a little bit and I thought, I want to find out when this stuff hits the market. Guess what? They've been doing variations of this technology since 2012. So it's been on the market. You've been eating it for some time. The beef.
10 years. More, 10,
the beef.
12, 11 years.
Yeah, the beef people are claiming they're not going to do it. But with the laws the way that they are, where the packaging can't tell you the country of origin, you don't know what you're eating. So I would suggest if you're still going to the store, which, by the way, it's been tested and there's stuff even in the organic, stuff. And if you don't believe it, you can find somebody with a microscope and dig through it yourself. You're going to find stuff in there that doesn't belong in there, from plastics to other things that are unknown. But either way, the plan is to put that in everything, from your vegetables to your fruit to your meat. And this way you can't get away from their system unless you are eating your own supplied food, that you take control of where you get every single bite, where you drink your water. Like I haven't drank any, tap water or regular water for probably 20 years, because I knew what was in it and I knew what it did to you and I know who came up with it. So I didn't want any part of it. I've been drinking, reverse osmosis water since then. And that's a big thing. And you brought that up earlier. Where are you going to get the water from? People are and it goes back to this idea of instant gratification. I'm thirsty. I need a can of soda. I'm thirsty. I get a bottle of water. What happens when they don't have the stuff at that store, at your convenience store, at your grocery store, whatever? You going to drink the tap water? I mean, haven't we learned our lesson on that? I mean, Flint, Michigan, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want that. You want a source of your own water. So that's just as important as your food. If you're growing your own food and you have, I don't know, like here, there's a source of water that no one can control, and it's called snow, and it melts and it runs off the mountain. And I happen to be lucky enough to live by a mountain where I know that they can't control all of the water. And if you don't have water filters, you're really up the creek without a paddle. I mean, you're drinking contaminated stuff, basically. I mean, that's how it is. So in order to get our mind and body in sync, we not only have to do that for ourselves, but we need to connect to other people that are on the same trip of being clear-headed about producing and not really users, because that's basically, there's 8 billion people out there that have been, institutionalized in one way or another to live a certain lifestyle. And the people that live in areas that don't live this new lifestyle, basically what the Western world and China is now offering, they have the longest lifespans. They are not sick. And if you don't believe me, you can just look that up and find out outbreaks of things happen and yada, yada, yada. They seem to be happening in the place that you would think they wouldn't be, which is the industrialized Western world and in China, because China is not far, if not equal to what we got going on. And we all know we're not making nothing over here in the U.S. What are we making? We make garbage. We make entertainment, maybe. But what are we actually making? See, China's on a different trip. They're making everything. They're exploiting everything. They're using fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow. So the whole idea that we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot over here and cut off our own energy and cut off our own water and cut off our own food to despite our face is ridiculous. So we have to just get out of their whole uniparty weird matrix system that is controlling everything from the way you think to what you eat. And those are very much intertwined, in my opinion. What's going into your body is making you susceptible to ideas, if that makes sense.
Unfortunately, yes, it does. So how are we going to be able to take control of the food? You can only do that working with other people, because you have to think about just the mind shock of this is people getting out and actually having to get on the land every day and do the work to be able to grow enough for yourself. That's a huge amount of work. Now, if you have many people working together, it's much easier. But you'd have to think about how many calories the average person would need per year. 1 million calories? 2 million? You'd have to think about someone comes from fat. Where's your oil coming from? Again, that comes back down to raising something. Rabbits, goat, sheep, whatever it would be. Birds. Some fat source needs to come in there, and then have the whole animal husbandry thing, and then what about the grains that you're going to use to feed your animals, and also the hay. They're going to need something for the wintertime to get them over. So now you're talking about growing 1 or 2 acres just for feed and fodder on the grain side, and then equally another 2 to 3 acres for something like Sudan sorghum grass to get them a huge amount of green matter to get them through the winter. Now you think about, now you're growing it for the animals too, so it's going to take more than you're going to need some help. But if you can get it to that economy of scale where you actually have that land, I promise you there will be people there that would want to help you grow that on that land so they could stay on there. With very simple accommodation, if people had woodworking skills, for example, they could build some decks and you could put your tents on it and you could live in the forest, come back to the main house for dinner. You know what I mean? Got food, extra hands, groovy spot, almost like an organic farm, but not Thailand style, obviously. But people would want to stay where it's safe. But you got to think about, if you're going to transfer if you're going to, let's say that you're going to wander from one place to another. I want to talk about weight for a second, because you said something really important about gold being just for the money to hold on to the store of value. It's only just to hold on to the value. Silver's more of an investment, and gold is just to hold it. But you think of the 80-to-1 ratio right now, and it was 120 to 1 or 120, 118 ratio of how many ounces of silver it would take to buy 1 ounce of gold. Right when COVID started, it was 120 ounces of silver would buy you 1 ounce of gold. You're right. The price didn't move that much, but now it's down to 80 to 1 for gold. So now it takes 80 ounces of gold to buy 1 ounce, or 80 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. The thing is the weight on it. So if you take 80 and you divide by 16 to make a pound, you get 5 pounds of metal. You have to move 5 pounds of silver to equal 1 ounce of gold. Now the weight in that, like, you could slide that one coin in your pocket, walk away with it if you need. Now, let's say you're trying to take 5 ounces of gold. That's 25 pounds of metal. How are you're definitely going to get caught with that 25 pounds of silver walking through somewhere. Holy smokes. That would make you a target anyway. 25 pounds of silver. Sheesh. So there are some needs for some things at certain times. People working on or around in a community will be one of those. So it might be a good idea to start talking with others around you about some of these same things. Now, it might seem woo-woo a little moment for a lot, but it does seem like the messaging's coming through completely clear for everybody across all strata, high and low, religious, whatever. Everybody's getting the same messaging. Something's going to flip in the economy, and I could just boil it down to pretty much that. Something's going to flip in the economy. Consistent messaging everywhere. Usually, that kind of messaging would be constricted into just the business news, or the finance news, or the publications for real estate, or the office rental, publications, whatever that would be. Now it's going to get turned on its head. Even way down, anybody who reads just like CNN in the day, or just anybody talking anything on the street, understands there's a problem with the economy and the way stuff costs so much right now, and it's not going to go down, and it keeps running away, and people are asking, why does it keep increasing? Like the whole planet gets it. The whole planet understands it's about to flip, or something is in motion of flipping. And that's messaging from the bottom to the top and top to the bottom. So messaging is clear. You're going to have, that's what I'm saying. If you start the conversation, sometimes it's going to be a little easier now to do than it would have been like pre-COVID, when you've been laughed off the floor, or even during COVID time when people would go, well, yeah, but still the experts over there said this. Ha ha. But now, people, remember all this? I'm sorry I said all the bad stuff to you. Can you explain what's going on? Like there's always, it's just easier to open the conversation right now. And, Ransom, I like the unknown twilight to a point, but you're in the twilight zone, dude.
It's predictable though. Like we talked about this last year, that about this time they would bring back our old friend. And here in the headlines, India forced to bring back mask laws. So you can, brand new thing. The same thing as the old thing, but different. And that's going to be spreading around this spring. I can just see that. And if it doesn't, that's great. But, if you could talk a whole country that's as big as India into doing this, which they didn't last time, by the way, but a lot of people did participate. And we saw the future in India as far as people were willing to do something that the government wanted, that they didn't want to do, because the government was going to take their phone privileges away like they were little kids. And, if people will fold over something as trivial as worthless as a cell phone, I understand that a lot of them had all their money, and, it wasn't worthless to them. It was so much, valuable to them that they went ahead and just capitulated to things that they didn't believe in. And that's a real worry to me. It's because although we talk about community and all these other things and what we're going to do and what we think people are going to do, when the time comes to it, a lot of people just lack a spine, and they go ahead and they'll do stuff that they knew that they shouldn't do to get along. And we can't have that mindset. You might have to do it in public as camouflage, because of the way things are going. But I refuse to do it. I refused to do it last time. I'm not going to live in a prison planet. I don't want to live in a prison planet. And that's what they're trying to, construct, basically. It's that instant gratification, so they can pump dopamine in your mind every 5 to 9 seconds with anything. With entertainment, like I said, news, it doesn't matter what it is. It's all set up like that, and all of it doesn't have anything to do with you filling your belly. I mean, really, that seems so obvious that it's really bizarre that us in the future have got to a point where we're having to talk about something that people in the past already knew. That was day-to-day life. They already knew, oh, the weather's bad. You know what? I'm going to save back some of these seeds in case we have a bad year. I don't want to waste them all this year. I'm going to try to grow. If it doesn't grow or whatever, we have it for seeds. We can eat it. If we're starving, that's the great thing about, prepping as far as growing stuff. You don't have to eat it. like it's weird because I grew a garden, and the 3 years ago we started eating squash and tomatoes and stuff, and it wasn't long until I got this face from the family like, oh, squash again. So you might not want to eat it all the time, but you can store it, and guess what? It doesn't matter how many times you eat it in a row. When you're hungry, it's going to be delicious. It's going to be nutritious, and people will get over it. But this whole idea that they're kind of bringing back this whole idea of what we already lived through tells you that they are not done with their plans. They are not done with further destroying everything. And that's all I see on the government end is destabilization. That's one of their favorite words, destabilization. That's what they did to the Middle East. That's what's happening to Europe. That's what's happening to the Americas. We did it to Mexico. And I say we because everywhere you look at any of these destabilization programs, guess who you find behind that? You find one of the bigger governments, whether it's China, the United States, Russia. It doesn't matter. They are about being the empire, and they are going to continue and restrict and collect all of the resources available going into any kind of emergency. And if they're already acting like that when supposedly the planet's fine as far as food goes, imagine what kind of draconian measures they're going to start taking when people are actually hungry and demanding that their representatives and their governments do what they want because they've already capitulated once. And see what that got you. It didn't really, but then there's that whole other half of the population that thinks they did the right thing. And that there lays in the problem. We have two different vibrations and two different ways of thinking, and they are trying to get the two groups to annihilate each other. When, like we've always, said that saying, divide and conquer. That's exactly what they do. So they keep everybody occupied with all these things that doesn't really matter who shot Nelly in the belly with the meatball. Meanwhile, your resources are dwindling away. Your freedoms are evaporating all around you. And, if you don't do something or at least recognize what's going on, you're definitely part of the problem. So you're not part of the solution. And just think about if each person, whether they're poor, rich, middle class, whatever they are, do their part to grow some food with the resources they have now. When the resources run out other places, it's not such a hit. It's not such a thing. And then that's when we start finding charities and different things that start, helping the cohesion of civilization stay together. And I really hope that it'll go that way. But since this whole thing started about 2.5, 3 years ago, one of the first things that I talked about is the pantries and the free food and stuff like that. And then you have EBT is the futures version of the soup kitchen. It's the digital soup kitchen. People get their EBT and their benefits, and they don't worry about nothing. It's another month that they got some food. They ain't worried about it. As soon as the 1st or the 15th comes, all their problems are gone now until 30 days later when they're back in the same position. And none of those people are using that resource to stockpile. They're eating it. They're eating, fast foods. They're eating stuff in the box. They're eating, you can imagine, you've been to the grocery store, you see all the stuff there that's not really food. And when it comes to the real food items, this is a good trick to find out how long it'll last. Go to your local grocery store and look at the vegetable and fruit section and look at the meat section, because those are the milk and the cheese. We'll go ahead and add that there. So those are the 3 food groups. That doesn't include grains and corn and wheat packaged in boxes, which in my opinion is cattle food. And I don't want to be part of the cattle. I eat meat, vegetables, and of course some of these other things can be a filler. But if you want to see what's really going on, go down to your grocery store and look at what's there, and then divide that by the population that's probably going to that store. And you will realize they don't have anything. They barely have enough to feed like a little tribe at each store. And then we all know that it shuts down in 3 days if they don't get a delivery. So these are real things that we're going to have to deal with. And, maybe everything's hunky-dory and nothing happens and everything fizzles out and we keep going the way we're going. You still have, the potential for anything to happen. And whenever you start doing this stuff, not only is it fulfilling to grow your own stuff and look at what you've accomplished, but just that whole idea of worry. It kind of fades away because you're going to be eaten. It's fine. If your belly's full, you can do whatever you want. And that's what ancient man did. They ate, they had a fire, They got their mental, status good. They had, music and wine, and they were basically living the life that we should be living now. That is the, what we were given, and it was kind of taken away, or we gave it away.
Maybe gave it. Because I'm looking at a headline here. I was jumping back on the net because I found a Zero Hedge article talking about flooded California farmland delays plantings. And I looked down and I was reading it. 69,000 farms are going to be disrupted due to, for vegetables and fruits, planting delays in 69,000 farms. That's a lot. And they got these huge pictures of flooded walnut orchards. But as I was trying to turn that on, this story flashed on Microsoft alert here. Experts on alert, megaquake off the U.S. coast due to hole in the fault line. I was like, well, shoot, we are looking for some. Let me look down in the article and see where it is and what it's about. And they don't really tell the organization until like paragraph 12 or something. The robotic discovered those sea vents in 2015. So I'm like, you saw a bunch of bubbles coming out of the seafloor in 2015, and now this is like a fake headline for me here. Pissed me off. Because this one is now, making people go, oh, that was such a junk story. And each time I see a mega quake or a quake story, it's just going to be a fluff piece like this. But now there are some super big quakes. And that was called, again, it's off the Daily Mail. Experts on alert for mega quake off the U.S. coast due to a hole in the fault line. That sounds like a song, a hole in the fault line. Okay. I need some guitar. So this is that same Tulare Basin area that I talked about plural weeks ago, continues to fill up because they're bracing for the impacts of historic snowpack. So this lake they drained 100 years ago is now refilling, but the thing is, it's full of businesses, homes, farms, mainly farms, but it's a huge amount of the U.S. Vegetable supply. And Ransom, I found a percentage for you. 227% of average as of March 27th was the latest totals they have for the snowfall, which means 2.2 times higher than ever. So think about that. 10% more moisture added up into the atmosphere. Hunga Tonga eruption, January 2022. And suddenly everything is doubling its snow and rain records. Do you think that's a coincidence? I mean, the Aquarius makes more sense. There's going to be more water in the atmosphere. So when you talk about the water, everything's going to be about the water. So I'm wondering how the water extinguishes the star or reduces the current flow in. It appears it gets dimmer, which you would appear that if you poured water on a fire, it would make it dimmer. There's a lot of analogies. You just got to pull for them. It's ancient history here. So what do you think there's a correlation between the water bearer and a huge water vapor eruption in our atmosphere that they've never seen before? Maybe this is a cycle too. When the water bearer comes back, maybe that volcano erupts once every 25,000 years, but it erupts. They know the cycle. When we enter Aquarius, that one erupts and you get this huge, gigantic water plume around the planet. Now imagine knowing that cycle in itself. Every 20,000, every 25,000, every 12,500 years, you get this one single eruption out of the middle of the ocean right there, and you get a water vapor planet for a few years, and you know that one for sure. That's a no-brainer. Put your money on red. That's a no-brainer. Spin the roulette wheel, my friend.
Yeah, they're calling that Fort Lauderdale event a one in a 1,000-year event there. How about that? 1 in 1,000 years. But I actually don't think that the name Aquarius has much to do with what's going to happen. It might. I mean, but to think that, you would have to think that we've lived this cycle more than once. And I've always argued that if the Mayan and other cultures had a 26,000-year history of the precession of the equinox, they didn't just watch it one time. They had to have seen it go around twice. It has to be a 52,000-year cycle for them to know that it repeats. So we know that, every 2,000 years, a different constellation in the sky is up there dominating, and this one's going to be Aquarius. That's why they name them these things. But there is going to be a lot of water. And after they've been talking about drought, we know there's going to be lots of water. I mean, look at, that lake that just showed up there. That's an old lake, and they've acted like, it was gone forever, and they just started farming. I was wondering how many places are going to be like that. And not to mention, we brought up that, they were talking about droughts and fires, etc. And then we were looking at all of the, seeds and grain that was piled up on the side of the rivers. Who knows what happened to that or what's going on with that? However, whatever's there that's going to be there this spring is definitely going to get flooded. So if you live in a flood zone, you might think about leaving. And a good example of that, and I like to compare things to ancient times. The Cahokia civilization appeared in the Mississippi Valley in the middle of the United States about 600 AD, and they started building pyramids and platforms. And I think that the push to do that is because of what happened probably 50 to 60 years earlier, which was the whole several years or decade of darkness that happened. And so they were really about what was going to be happening. Now that civilization started flourishing, and the strata that tells us what was going on there says through several hundred years, they dealt with severe droughts, and they kept building closer and closer to the river. But at some point, a massive flood happened down the Mississippi, and we know that because the Cahokia civilization just stopped dead in their tracks. And what we find all through their, the archaeological evidence is this big layer of silt and clay showed up, and that at the same time as they stopped doing anything in all these places. So for you to think that if you live along the Mississippi Valley and, you're measuring things on how long they've been taking records for, you might be in for a surprise to find out that every so often that entire river gets about 3 or 4 times the size that it normally is. And that could last for years, depending on what the cycle is doing. Like, so if we are indeed going into an El Nino cycle, we know that there's going to be a lot of rain in the Southwest, which means a lot of blooming, a lot of flooding, a lot of flash flooding, because monsoon dumps a lot of water in a generally drought area that's naturally a drought. But what happens if the pattern lasts 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then on top of that, you start having geologic additions to the amount of water in the atmosphere, like, say, this volcano goes up. You were bringing up the Russian volcano that's, it's like 30,000 and 40,000, 50,000. And then did I hear you say 60,000 feet? Now imagine that happening in 5 or 6 different places on the earth at once. And you could see, if you don't literally have supplies to make it a decade, you might not be around at the end of that. Maybe that's not going to happen, but it sure does seem like the governments of the world are planning for hard times. Otherwise, they wouldn't be pushing their agendas so fast. And how bizarre is it? And how accurate are they? Like Nostradamus, whenever they came up with these agendas, right? The Agenda 2020, Agenda 2030, etc. You read into their white papers at the Bilderbergs and the Davos and the World Economic Forum. They've been telling us exactly what they were going to do for 30, 40 years, right to your face. If you say it, of course, you get banned, censored, called a conspiracy theorist, but they don't. And they believe these things are going to happen, and they are pushing for an entire lockdown of the planet. They even want to put things in your body that record what you're doing from the inside. They said it themselves. And guess what? When I hear a psychopath tell me something, I believe them. And I don't believe them later when they say, oh, that's not what I meant. I didn't say that, because, on and on. We see this happening from George Soros. We see it from what's the Eats the Bugs guy, Klaus Schwab, and all of those other guys. I forget their names, but there's hundreds of them. And they're a low rung on whoever's running things. I don't even know, which brings me to maybe switch this a little bit to woo-woo. Here it is. Scientists reveal. No, that's the wrong one. Okay, here it is. It's talking about go ahead.
Never too woo-woo. Please continue.
All right. So the idea is someone directed an AI to destroy humanity. And guess what? It tried its best. However, it didn't really have any power. But a user behind an experimental open source attempt to make GPT or ChatGPT-4 fully autonomous created another AI program called Chaos GPT, and it gave it the goal of destroying humanity. It tried to do that, actually. It got on, it tried to get people to support it on Twitter. This is an AI-run thing. So you think about these ideas. This is what they're feeding into this transhuman world, every aspect of it. And we talk about who's at the top of the rung. I don't know, but it's increasingly looking like they may have an AI in charge of things. And this article goes into the fact, like I've said many times, people are using it to do their work. They're not even working. They're just using this AI to do their we know that it's writing movies now. It's writing news now. It's writing presidential speeches. For all I know, it's writing the script for the entire world, what's going on right now. And you think that's far-fetched, but then when you think about how many infrastructures are using AI to run everything, including the stock market, and so how, if you ask the AI like this, hey, we need to reduce the population or we need to reduce this or that, how do we do that? Well, the AI is going to come up with the information it's been inputted. And from what we can tell, the programmers of these AIs have an agenda. And they also have an idea of how the world should be. And it just so happens to line up with what the World Economic Forum is doing. So for all I know, they're all getting, printed ideas every so often. And it really does seem like that sometimes. So what we got to do is use real intelligence against the artificial intelligence, real human connection. And we need to just get rid of this whole idea of, internet running everything, computers doing everything, computers tracking us. And I think this really started when Japan gave the world the idea of just-in-time shipping. And that's when that instant gratification thing became a reality in the consumer world. And now everything is based off this just-in-time shipping. So that's why when you go to the store and you have a certain thing, guess what? They didn't buy it. They have all the stuff that didn't sell there, but they didn't reorder the stuff that sells, the stuff you want, because we no longer are on a supply and demand, type of economy. So right there means that you're going to have to decide where you're going to get your supply for your demand, which means creating your own produce, creating your own products, and interweaving that with other people that are doing the same thing, so that we can continue on despite what's going on.
Yeah. What's going to go on is the continuation of the cycle repeating. And you had some interesting numbers there. You correct me if I'm wrong. You said 26,000 years on one cycle would be observable, and you would notice the changes, but you'd have to see it again to understand the onsets and the repeat patterns of such time duration that you'd have to go through the cycle literally twice to understand that it was a cycle, because the first one was like a one-off. So it had to be the second to prove that it was a cycle. But what if you did 10 of those cycles, 520,000 years? You would not only know it was a cycle for sure, but you would know the intensity of it. You would really know the intensity of it. You would know when it would begin, but you would also get a good indicator on like the onset. Maybe it's a super fast, rapid onset, and maybe it's a more gradual, slow onset. And then you would know the middle intensity of it. But imagine if you had been through 100 of these cycles and been able to match them out. Going back, 5.2 million years? Imagine how much knowledge you might have that far back in time, observing 100 of these cycles. Like, after seeing 100 of them, you would get it really wired in, especially if the tech had advanced and computers that we see now were still of the ancients of old who had that tech way back then. What you're seeing right now is an orchestrated illusion in front of a matrix based off of that AI, millions of years advanced. millions of years advanced of anything we have now. But what if you could go back even further than that? Go back 20 million years, 25 million years to see 500 of these cycles. If you were going to continue to retain power and control a planet as a resource-based operation, then you would know that these natural variations in the climate occurred. Just like mining operations in, say, Indonesia. They understand the dry season. They understand the monsoon season. They got to adjust their operations based on how much rainfall there is coming down during the different seasons. It would be no different if you were having a planet of 8 billion people that were doing things to mine, perhaps gold, silver, something that's needed for trade in a faraway star system, or even, inter-solar system here. Some of this way out in the open, for example, some of the science fiction movies make a lot of sense. It's just like trading in a bazaar in somewhere in Cairo in 1850, There's a big space around us, literally, when I say that space. Let's say you knew 500 of these entries and exits from. Well, we're talking a grand cycle here. We're not even talking a minuscule grand solar minimum at 400 years, or even once a change of an age, 2,000 year. We're talking about the entire movement around the zodiac, 26,000 years times 2 to make sure it's a cycle times 500. That's where we get 500x on the same cycle of 26,000 years, which is what the reason I give you that number is the Indian Vedic texts describe 23 million years approximately is when we, quote unquote, as humanity have been on this planet. Now that is so that gives some precedence. If you had known and had tech and were that far back and had observed this many cycles on the grand cycles, if you knew a grand cycle was culminating on the planet that was your biggest farm producer for a minute, you would try to extract all the wealth. You really would. And you would also try to leave a whole bunch of just, all right, the last person that wants to stay on deck on the ship, down there, but we'll give you a bunch of food and entertainment and things. If you look at it in that sense of the Earth just being a mining colony, a colony of sorts to procure resources, knowing that after one of these resets, that the Earth would replenish itself, recleanse itself, regrow itself. And then in another 1,000 or 2,000 years, you would come back and it's anew again, but you run the same old game plan again and again and again for 25 million years. It's a bit of kind of like, inoculating a petri dish with agar, having the species grow on it, use the agar as a harvest and then scrape the petri dish clean and start over again. Whoosh. Farm Earth. Now, how do you move through the reset on something like this? Somebody knows these because, Ransom, you're talking about, what was that? The Cahokia. That was part of the Mississippian culture, 800 AD to 1600 AD. And they just collapsed. There's a famous area around here called Sitico that was part of that. It's even on their maps and thing. Etowah also, I saw the Indian Mounds going down to the Atlanta airport. If you're driving down 75, Etowah is off of there once you get into Georgia pretty deep. There's a huge amount of just mounds out there in Etowah. They're called the Etowah Indian Mounds, and there's all these signs going down I-75 that'll get you there. But what is it with the systematic resets anyway on these smaller periods of time? 800 to 1600, that's an 800-year variable there. But the Mayans collapsed around 800 AD. So did the Tang Dynasty in China. So again, that's another 800-year cycle, or 400. But for them to end on that time when another ascends is pretty interesting in time, how it's like a continuous timeline from the collapse of the Maya, 800 AD, and then suddenly the Mississippian culture rises and there's, 100 million people all up and down from Canada over as far as we know is the East Coast, everything east of the Mississippi. And west, a lot of it west. That was a vast culture, vast, 100 million people vast on this same continent. Just a few hundred years ago. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. How close that is in time, yet we don't even understand it. Not taught in the history books. These changes show catastrophism. And that is Velikovsky. They did not want him in. As soon as you even said Velikovsky in a paper, you were removed from your academia because they did not want this information out. But does seem that it's coming to head right now, Ransom. I don't know. It does seem that Mother Nature has a sign. It is signs in the skies for sure.
Yeah, it is. And obviously, all of ancient man was paying attention to what's going on. So, you're mentioning millions of people, the Mayan, the Cahokia. We already know that in 536 AD, the Mayans just stopped doing anything for like 100 years. They didn't do anything. So way past like till 650 or something, they weren't doing nothing. However, at the same time, the Chacoan or Anasazi or whatever you want to call them, they started building buildings. They started building granaries. They started living life different, not as hunter-gatherers. And then you go over to the Cahokia people, you see the same thing. So genetically, we know from Chaco Canyon that was built about 599 or 600 AD, they had Mesoamerican genetics. So they had Mayan genetics, Aztec genetics. So we know people were moving back and forth, trying to reestablish civilization. And you're right, there were millions of people living along the Mississippi Valley, and there were millions and millions of people we now know living in the Yucatan Peninsula. Where there's cities that are so big that are being uncovered. And whatever happened pretty much changed everything. New empires came, all the old ones fell. And to get back to this point real quick before we run out of time, you have to realize that archaeology tries to tell you that we've only been farming for 10,000 years, which is ridiculous, because the whole reason to pay attention to the precession of the equinox, which takes 25,772 years exactly for a full precession to occur, that means that you have to times that times 2, which is about 52,000 years, and that's broke up into 71.6 years for 1 degree every 72 years. So 50.3 seconds of arc per year, or 1 degree every 71.6 years. And speaking of the Mayan, their entire system was based on 72, which they knew that whenever the Pleiades came back to a certain spot, that was another increment that had taken place. So in order for them to know that the precession of the equinox repeats itself, means that at least 52,000 years of farming history has taken place on Earth. I don't care what the archaeologists say. We know that humans were paying attention to this precession of the equinox, and really the only reason to pay attention to that is to keep track of when you need to plant, when things die, which years are going to be good. They had that all figured out at some time, and now we fast forward to the future. Nobody knows nothing about any of that. They barely know how to farm. They don't know what's going on with the time. And, they always talk about how Mayans were obsessed with time. That's because they knew it repeated itself. Exactly. I don't know where they got the information, but they had it when they were fully formed civilization shows up. We know the Olmec gave it to them, their calendar system, which means the Olmec had to have get it from somewhere. They had to have got it from somewhere. And then Göbekli Tepe, you can just name all of these different places that were keeping track of a time scale of 52,000 years, with the only purpose being to know the arc on the Earth of how it's tilting back and forth, to know whenever they're going to, farm. That's the only reason that you would start paying attention to where the sun went down every single day. And think about how many human beings had to have paid attention for how long, just to know that every 52,000 years, a cycle completely repeated itself. And every 26,000 years is the cycle. So you can fit that into everything else. That's the tilt of the Earth that there's no way around admitting that human beings have been keeping track of this information for that long, at least, which means why aren't we paying attention to it?
72 years for 1 degree of arc span through the heavens, 360 degrees around 25,920 years. Does that math sound right to you? We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin signing off from the United States Conversations.
Time to prep it out.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.